going to say a little bit about some of the provocations, and uh, this kind of is a bit of a, I won't say it's random, but I'm just going to talk about 5 of them, just as a way of getting us back into the spirit of it. Um, and I'm curious because they're the set I've chosen to speak about today. On another day, it might have been a slightly different set. If I was in the room with you, it might be a different set. So, and you will all have your own 5 favourites, I'm sure. But anyway, um, and it's interesting because in many respects, the provocations are a sort of a summary of what's in the whole report in some ways, of certainly of the key messages. And I've been thinking for a while about how they might be useful. Um, and I think they're useful if they can help us think about how we are thinking. I think they can be used, and we have tried this out, they can be used with a group, any group interested in developing their own action inquiry, so that they can have a dialogue about how they understand the situation they're in, what's important to them. And I think that in this way, the provocations, which are written to be deliberately bold and assertive, to provoke, literally, a group working with them in that way could develop their own principles and think about what those principles might mean for them in practice. So they can devise their own principles and practices from them. And you might think of that as a kind of DIY set of navigation aids, a bespoke set that can help a group make choices and decisions more openly as it goes through its work. A couple of times I've shared these in the room with people, and it's always rather lovely. And I was wondering about how people might do that given our current limitations. But knowing many of you, I can see that there probably are lots of creative ways in which it could work with these. And there's also now the animation, which is based on most of this full list that's in the report. So the first one, which I probably pretty much would always want to have in a set, it is the one that appears first in the list. And although I've numbered the list, they're not really in any order. But this is the one that I think is probably the most fundamental. It's significant because it recognises that by asking questions, you influence the situation in some way. The report quotes Edgar Schein that everything you do in a system is an intervention, and everything you experience is data about the system. So we kind of know at some level that our questions are fateful. And if we accept that people are agents and that they're able to act in the world on the basis of their own sense-making and collective action, arguably, it's only really possible and ethical to research with people, not on them. The ways we've organised, despite saying that's quite a strong statement, the ways we've organised research or inquiry, we've often privileged outsider perspectives that are too often divorced from what's actually going on, too often divorced from the action. And we learn best from participation in things. So there are lots of people have different learning styles, but on the whole, we really truly understand something when we've experienced it for ourselves. We need to consider who gets to ask the questions, who shapes the questions, when do they get asked? Do they get asked at a time that's useful? The argument being that if we can learn to ask good questions of ourselves amidst all our kind of messy practices and routines, we can help to do better. We can help ourselves to learn, and importantly here, the last bit of this quote, to increase the probability of success of a program. So we're not disinterested. We're in fact very interested in the success of the work. And I think that's quite a high level of scrutiny, actually, probably higher than any we might be used to. It can help us have more honest conversations and create, I think, more of an appetite or a thirst for evidence. Thank you. So this is the one I've been talking about for the last 2-3 minutes. Inquiry is a form of intervening. It's not a separate, detached process. I hope that's come through with what I've said. I won't go over it. But I suppose the upshot of it is that, yes, we need to build our inquiry capacities. And we might value some form of facilitation to help us build skills and to work well with power. Right, I'm going to move on. Can you see the blue one? I hope you can. So this is really about looking to the future, and it really gets to what we think the purpose of inquiry is. In many ways, this is really a critique that's been made very eloquently by Ken Gergen, and he is quoted in the report. He's got a 2014 article, and he kind of says, this is my kind of paraphrasing of it, that much social research it might be said to have supported what I would think of as an advocacy model of change, that evidence is produced almost as ammunition, an argument for change. And of course, this has played a really, really important part in bringing about social change. But Ken Gergen suggests that we can build on that by also drawing on some of the qualities from other types of research. So from a prescriptive inquiry, we can draw on co-creativity and imagination. And from action research, we can draw on a more collaborative and a practice focus to help us explore possibilities and help us call what he calls future forming potential. So, you know, I've often spent a lot of time thinking about what's the point of research. And I've always liked the quote, it's a paraphrase that Peter Reason has used, that, and this is in the report as well, that the point of research should be to talk to each other about what we ought to be doing. And I really like that. It's neat, and it sort of puts the emphasis on dialogue, collaboration, purpose, values, and action in asking, what kind of future do we want to create? So I've moved on to number 6, a sort of mustard coloured one. I hope you can see that. This is really about supporting experimental action. And really, most simply, I understand this as a call to try things out. And obviously, many of us are involved in testing, prototyping, small tests of change, big tests of change. But I want to today just say that this idea of experimentation also includes more everyday inquiry practices, more mindful practices, if you like. And so I want to think about experimentation at all levels. And thinking about the first person level, Judy Marshall calls this living life as inquiry. I think that's a form of experimentation. So the message from that is it's never over, folks, I suppose. So the idea of appreciative dialogue. Some of you will know I've written about appreciative inquiry, and I've been on a bit of a journey with it myself. And you know, it has sometimes been characterized or even caricatured as almost evangelically focusing on the positive. And I suppose the argument in the paper is that we need to develop a better understanding of appreciation, particularly because of the part that it can play in developing relational practice and in generating motivation for change, but also because I think it has a particular value in thinking about emergence and about what might be coming up, where the energy might be for people. Many of us know that any change process faces huge emotional challenges. We have to inspire, energize, mobilize people to avoid doing change or trying to do change to people. And I think it's really easy, and this is not a criticism, it's just how we've learned to be, I guess. It's very easy to overlook or take for granted the positive everyday work that is going on literally under our noses. And, you know, going back to reading the report for this week, I reminded again about the idea of social recognition, which is in there. And I've seen some really powerful examples of the part that that can play in galvanizing people, just simply acknowledging their value and treating people with respect, inviting them into a process, is probably the most basic form of appreciation, but it's really vital in making any chance of collective leadership a reality. I also think there's something important in this one about the links between emotion and power, what we feel able to share, what it feels appropriate or professional to share, how we think about that. The courage it takes to be vulnerable, and the powerful impact or adverse consequences of being vulnerable. The other important thing here is the word dialogue. So it's about conversations about value, worth, what matters, those kind of things. It's not about a diagnosis of an expert or the most senior officer. We know that pushing for change causes resistance. Mutual inquiry, conversation about what is already valued is a really good basis for invoking really useful curiosity, and for sort of notching up or enhancing practice in ways that doesn't simply invoke defensiveness amongst people. So I think we can expand our notions of appreciation, particularly to value the idea of inquiry itself, to build aspirations for different futures, and to kind of encourage people to get involved in acting in new ways to help embed change. So I think I've just got one more. And I guess it's not a spectator sport. We are all active learners, and I think this is a good one to finish on. Many of us have been taught that the validity as to what counts as knowledge comes from standing on the outside and looking in. The kind of knowledge we need to participate to make our world and remake it is very different from that we need if we're to remain as observers. But I'm thinking that we are all and are already participants, and that this is what ultimately gives me hope, in essence, that because we've created what we have, so too can we change it. And that's really all I want to say today.